Hello and welcome to Binpipe. My name is Prasanjit. Today I'll show you how to install Ubuntu Linux on Virtualbox. For those of you who are trying to learn Linux and using Windows as their base operating system, you will find this useful to practice Linux. Before we begin, I would recommend you to download the Ubuntu ISO image from the Ubuntu website. I'll put the link in the description. And once you have downloaded the latest version of Ubuntu or any older version you like, save it somewhere, and then also download the VirtualBox installer from the virtualbox.org. I'll push the link for that as well, and install that software. So the installation is straightforward, just following the wizard and installing the default option. Once that is done, we are presented with this screen when we open up the VirtualBox manager by clicking on the VirtualBox icon. Now we are ready to move on to roll the Linux installation on VirtualBox. Now we can use this VirtualBox manager dashboard to install new Linux distribution. Multiple versions of Linux can be installed using VirtualBox. They will create separate virtual machine for each Linux installation, and it will be independent to work with. And in order to begin the installation, we'll have to click on new and put in the name, that is Ubuntu 20 LTS. That's the version that I downloaded, and then you can choose the default options for the rest of them. Make sure that you have space in your hard disk, because it's going to use users this particular directory. In my case, it would be different in your case. Now this is the memory where we have to define the RAM. I recommend putting it 4 gigs of RAM, so that way it runs well. If you do not have enough memory, then it'll even work with as low as 512 MB, but there could be cases when it's slow. So once the memory is designated, we can continue with the wizard and move on to the next step. So here we are. We have a maximum amount of memory that is to be used is 4 gigs that is allocated here. ISO image, so it will install Linux, and later on we can unmount that ISO image so that it works next time directly booting from the disk. So here we can see Ubuntu has booted up, and we can make the selections like choosing the language in this case, and then click on install Ubuntu, and And this option, try Ubuntu, is for mounting the live CD without installing, but we are going to install it on the virtual machine, so click on that, and the kind of keyboard you are using, so that's should be default English US. Continue, and then you can choose the default option, normal installation. If you do not want these softwares and want to make it bare minimum, you can choose the minimal installation. That will be without any GUI or Office or media players and web browser, but we'll need that, so let that be. It's up to you. Normally in servers people do not have that. Now downloading updates, this is also optional. If you do not have a good bandwidth, uncheck it. If you have it, you can keep it checked. That will update any recent software that has been released after this ISO was downloaded or put up in the Ubuntu website. So that's it. Click on continue. That takes you to the next page in the widget, erase disk and install Ubuntu. Now this erase disk doesn't mean that it will erase your hard disk of the host system. It'll just clean up and format the disk of the virtual machine, the .vdi file that we created. So nothing to worry. You can just keep this option checked and move on to the installation phase. So that's it. Like, it will create a default partition. Those who create the something else option will be presented with the option of choosing their own sizes for partitions. We won't need that for a practice system. So I click here, and you can see it moves on to the next page where you can choose your location so that the time is set as per the time zone. So I'll just keep it at New York and continue. Well, here you put in the name. I just put it as Bill. And this is the name of the computer. You can put in whatever you want, and then the username that you'll use to log into the system, and type in a password that you will use to log in. And this is the option that directly logs you and presents you to the desktop, so you don't have to type in the password, or the second option will prompt you for a password. So it's optional. If it's a computer that no one else uses, which would be the case with you, then you can choose the first option and continue. Now it will install Ubuntu, all the packages that are required, and once it's done, you can just restart it. Well, that was pretty fast for me, but it depends on the speed of your computer. Now we can reboot the computer, and by that I mean rebooting the virtual machine. And once the virtual machine restarts, we will directly be logged into the Ubuntu system. For those who have the CD as the first boot device, will have to uncheck that, otherwise it will again go into booting of the disk, and that will cause problems. Now I'm powering off the system so that we can come back and remove the boot option, and then finally we'll be able to use this Ubuntu virtual machine in a normal way. So power off the machine. That closes the Ubuntu virtual machine. So here, going into storage, you can uncheck or unmount the CD ISO image, so that frees the first boot device, that was the CD. So next time you boot, the system will boot from the hard disk and will be able to boot into the Ubuntu system. So this way we'll be able to use our Ubuntu Linux and practice. So you will find more exercises in this Linux series about Linux commands and all in the next video. So keep practicing, keep learning. And by the way, you can see I was able to log into my Ubuntu desktop virtual machine, and I can practice Ubuntu Linux. So stay with me and you practice Linux too, which is going to help you a long way in your career. All the best, and I'll be there for any help. Put in your questions in comments. Thanks a lot. Thanks for learning. Keep your spirits up.